You are moments from glory. The summit you have sacrificed everything for is just ahead, a knife-edge ridge dividing the earth from the sky. But as you take a labored step forward, a splash of color against the stark blue-white ice snags your attention. There's someone in your path, a climber, collapsed in the snow, unmoving. To help them is to abandon your dream, the culmination of years of sacrifice, training, and expense. To continue is to leave them to die. This isn't a thought experiment. For those who dare to climb the world's highest mountains, it's a real, terrible choice. And the answers given in that thin, frozen air expose a dark side to mountaineering that the community rarely talks about. High on the roof of the world, in the realm above 8,000 meters known as the death zone, the air is so thin that every breath is a desperate, icy gasp. The body is in a state of slow decay. The summit, a place reserved in myth for gods and in reality for heroes, is almost within your grasp. But then, you see it. A flicker of color in the endless white, a fellow human, unmoving. If you stop, you abandon the dream that has defined your life for years. You forsake the thousands of dollars invested, the time away from family, the very obsession that drove you here. If you continue, you are stepping over a dying person to achieve personal glory. This is the brutal reality on the world's highest peaks, and the choices made in that thin, cold air expose a dark truth about what it really takes to stand on top of the world. Beyond the breathtaking summits and triumphant photos lies a hidden world of intense pressure, moral ambiguity, and profound psychological turmoil. We celebrate the conquerors, but we seldom ask about the cost. This is the story of the shadow that haunts the highest places on Earth, from the psychological struggles that can turn passion into a dangerous compulsion, to the moral compromises that force good people into terrible choices, and the environmental decay that is turning sacred mountains into the world's highest junkyards. It almost always starts with love. A love for the raw, untamed beauty of nature, a primal desire for challenge. Climbing offers a unique state of flow that can silence the deafening noise of modern life, and many climbers find profound solace, confidence, and a sense of purpose on the rock. But for some, this healthy passion curdles into something far more sinister. It morphs into a relentless, all-consuming drive that looks, feels, and acts like a behavioral addiction. Studies suggest that for a subset of mountaineers, the sport mimics the patterns of addiction, an insatiable need for more risk, a bigger challenge, and an unhealthy reliance on climbing to regulate their emotions. The euphoric high of reaching the summit becomes a fix. The identity of climber becomes so fused with their sense of self that the fear of losing that identity can become more terrifying than falling from a cliff. The return to normal life feels like a painful withdrawal. This addictive cycle is fueled by what's known in the community as summit fever, a single-minded obsession with reaching the top that overrides logic, safety protocols, and even the primal instinct for self-preservation. Climbers gripped by this fever ignore worsening weather, push past established turnaround times, and rationalize away their own exhaustion. The summit transforms from a goal into a compulsion. This phenomenon is tragically amplified in the notorious death zone. Above 8,000 meters, the severe lack of oxygen hypoxia wreaks havoc on the brain. The brain cells shift to anaerobic metabolism, which can lead to swelling and impaired concentration. Judgment falters, memory is impaired, and complex thought is reduced to a primitive, almost animalistic drive. You're literally not thinking straight. And in that state of hypoxic delirium, the summit is often the only thought that makes any sense. The 1996 Everest disaster, chronicled in John Krakauer's Into Thin Air, stands as a stark testament to this, where multiple climbers, including experienced guides, pushed past their agreed-upon turnaround time, contributing to one of the deadliest days in the mountain's history. This psychological pressure cooker contributes to a hidden mental health crisis within the climbing community. Despite the romanticized image of rugged self-reliance, the lifestyle can amplify struggles like depression, anxiety, and PTSD. The very coping mechanisms required for a high-stakes expedition, suppressing fear, compartmentalizing emotions, pushing through immense suffering, can become chronically damaging when applied to everyday life. When the climb ends, those suppressed emotions don't just disappear, they fester. Many elite climbers have spoken out about their struggles. from depression to addiction, revealing the vulnerability behind the stoic facade. Many climbers live a transient life, chasing seasons and weather windows across the globe. This lack of structure, while adventurous, can lead to real mental distress, a feeling of being unmoored from the stable anchors of community and routine. The fear they feel isn't just about a physical fall. It's often a manifestation of deeper anxieties about a loss of control in their lives. Tragically, this can lead to a downward spiral. The mountains, once a source of life-affirming joy, become a landscape of internal torment. The place they go to feel most alive is also the place that can amplify the darkest parts of their psyche, pushing them ever closer to the edge, in more ways than one. On the 15th of May, 2006, a 3-4-year-old English mathematician and experienced climber named David Sharp sat down to rest in a small rock alcove high on Mount Everest. He was attempting a solo climb, with minimal oxygen and no Sherpa support. The alcove was already infamous. It was the resting place of another climber, whose body, identifiable by his fluorescent green boots, had become a macabre and unavoidable landmark for years. Now, David Sharp was in that same cave, exhausted, freezing, and slowly dying. He wasn't a landmark yet. He was a man in crisis. And then they started coming. Over the course of that day, an estimated 40 climbers passed him on their way to and from the summit. They saw him. Some say he was unresponsive, already encased in ice. Others claim he was able to murmur his name. They were on their way up, high on ambition and summit fever, or on their way down, exhausted and severely hypoxic themselves. And one by one, they made a choice. They continued on. They left him. The story of David Sharp ignited a global firestorm, exposing what many saw as a moral corrosion at the heart of modern mountaineering. Sir Edmund Hillary, the first man to summit Everest, was publicly disgusted. I think the whole attitude towards climbing Mount Everest has become rather horrifying, he stated, arguing that in his day, saving another climber was an unquestionable duty that came before any personal ambition. Human life is far more important than just getting to the top of a mountain, he declared. But on Everest in 2006, that ethos seemed to have vanished into thin air. The incident forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question. What is the ethical duty of a climber in the death zone? The answer is terrifyingly ambiguous. Stopping to help is a monumental, life-threatening undertaking, and a mobile climber at that altitude is a near impossible dead weight. A rescue requires multiple people, enormous amounts of precious oxygen, and superhuman effort in an environment where every single step is a battle for one's own survival. The brutal math of the death zone suggests that an attempt to save one person could easily lead to the deaths of 3 or 4 rescuers. David Sharp's own mother stated she did not blame the other climbers, saying, "Your responsibility is to save yourself, not to try and save anybody else." Still, the image of climbers stepping over a dying man is deeply unsettling. It suggests the summit has become more important than our shared humanity. And this isn't an isolated incident. In 1998, Francys Arsentiev became the first American woman to summit Everest without supplemental oxygen, but collapsed during her descent. A team led by Ian Woodall and Kathy O'Dowd found her barely alive. She pleaded with them, "Don't leave me." They abandoned their own summit attempt and tried to help for over an hour, but the extreme cold and her deteriorating condition made a rescue impossible without sacrificing their own lives. They were forced to leave her, a decision that haunted them for years. For 9 years, her body, nicknamed Sleeping Beauty, remained on the main climbing route, a frozen testament to ambition and its ultimate cost. In 2007, Woodall led an expedition to return to the mountain, wrap her in an American flag, and move her body out of sight. These tragedies reveal a disturbing shift, driven largely by the commercialization of the world's highest peaks. Expeditions were once small teams of peers bound by a shared code of mutual responsibility. Now, many are large-scale commercial ventures filled with paying clients. The mountain has been reframed as a product to be consumed, a bucket list item to be checked off. Clients who have paid upwards of $50,000 to $100,000 feel entitled to their shot at the summit. Guides are under immense pressure to deliver that success. This dynamic has created a system ripe for exploitation, where the Sherpa people, the indigenous guides who are the true backbone of Himalayan climbing, bear a disproportionate amount of the risk. They are the ones fixing ropes through the deadly Khumbu icefall, carrying the heaviest loads and performing the most dangerous rescues, all while being paid a fraction of the client's fees. For a Sherpa guide, refusing to push a client forward can mean losing their job. Pushing on can mean losing their life. This ethical decay is sometimes personified in the controversial figure of Chantal Marouet, a talented French alpinist from the 1992nd. She was a gifted, driven climber, but was trailed by a dark reputation. On K2 in 1992, she was rescued by climbers Ed Viesters and Scott Fisher, who abandoned their own summit attempts to save her. Marouet never publicly thanked them, and was accused by some in the community of embodying a selfish summit at all costs mentality. Tragically, in 1998, Marouet and her Sherpa partner were found dead in their tent on Dhaulagiri. Her story, like David Sharp's, serves as a complex example of how intense, individualistic ambition can erode the unwritten principles of partnership and mutual responsibility that mountaineering was built on. The mountain doesn't just test your physical strength. It conducts a brutal, unforgiving audit of your character. Section 3. The world's highest junkyard. Environmental destruction. For centuries, the Sherpa people of the Khumbu region have revered Mount Everest, or Chomolungma, the goddess mother of the world, as a sacred place, the abode of deities. It is a living, spiritual entity deserving of profound respect. To many of the thousands of climbers who now flock there each year, it's a commodity. And the result of this fundamental clash in perspective is a slow-motion environmental catastrophe. The sacred mountain is being turned into the world's highest garbage dump. The problem starts at base camp and snakes all the way to the summit. With the boom in commercial expeditions, Everest's main routes are not only dangerously crowded but disgustingly polluted. For decades, everything from tents and ropes to oxygen cylinders and food packaging was simply left behind. When you are fighting for your life in the death zone, carrying down an empty oxygen bottle is the last thing on your mind. The result is a high-altitude landscape scarred by human negligence. Shredded tents flap in the wind like ghostly prayer flags. Piles of empty oxygen canisters litter the high camps. And then there is the human excrement. An estimated 12,000 pounds, or about 5,400 kilograms of human waste, is generated at base camp each season alone. Higher up, where there are no toilet facilities, climbers have historically just dug holes in the snow. As glaciers melt at an accelerating rate, decades of this buried waste are being exposed, contaminating meltwater that flows downstream. This isn't just an aesthetic problem, it's a looming public health crisis. This contamination threatens local communities with waterborne diseases like cholera and hepatitis A. The Great Glaciers of the Everest region are part of the water towers of Asia, providing fresh water to nearly 2 billion people. The goddess mother of the world is being poisoned. Even more insidiously, the mountain is being contaminated by something we can't see. A 2019 expedition found microplastics in every single snow sample they took, all the way to a location just below the summit at 8,440 meters. These microscopic fibers come from the very gear climbers rely on, their synthetic jackets, pants, tents, and ropes. With every step, every gust of wind, these materials shed countless tiny fibers, embedding a permanent, toxic legacy into the ice. This all unfolds against the terrifying backdrop of climate change. The Himalayas are warming at an alarming rate, faster than the global average. Glaciers are thinning and retreating rapidly, with some studies showing they have lost billions of tons of ice annually. This melt destabilizes the entire mountain ecosystem. As the ice that glues rock together melts, rockfalls become more frequent and unpredictable. The infamous Khumbu icefall is becoming even more unstable. Even the famed Hillary Step, a 40-foot vertical rock face that was the last major obstacle before the summit, collapsed, likely a casualty of the 2015 earthquake. There's a bitter irony here. Climbers, who so often speak of their profound love for the pristine wilderness, are active participants in its destruction. The very act of climbing, requiring air travel, synthetic gear, and leaving a physical footprint is now an act of pollution. Efforts are being made to clean up Everest, including Cash for Trash initiatives, but they often feel like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. For every oxygen bottle carried down, another is left behind. The goddess mother of the world is choking on our ambition. These stories are difficult, but they are essential. They challenge the romantic, sanitized image of mountaineering and force us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature and our impact on the planet. If you believe these complex issues deserve more attention, subscribe and join the conversation. We focus on the human stories behind the world's most extreme endeavors, not just the triumphs, but the tragedies and the moral questions they leave behind. The culture of mountain climbing sits at a difficult, icy crossroads. It represents the very best of the human spirit, courage, endurance, the relentless drive to explore our limits and the world around us. But the shadow it casts is long and dark. It is a world where passion can become a deadly compulsion, where the immense pressure of a single goal can erode moral character, and where the pursuit of pristine beauty actively contributes to its destruction. The stories of David Sharp and Francys Arsentiev are not just isolated tragedies. They are symptoms of a culture in crisis. They are haunting reminders that force us to ask what we truly value more: reaching the summit or helping the person struggling next to us. The rampant commercialization of the world's highest peaks has, in many ways, turned what was once a pilgrimage into a tourist transaction. It has created a system that too often exploits the vulnerable and rewards a dangerous, single-minded ambition. The now infamous images of long lines of climbers waiting for their turn on the summit ridge are a powerful symbol of a wilderness that has been tamed, packaged, and sold. The solutions are not simple. Stricter regulations on the number of permits and mandatory waste disposal rules are a start, but the most important change must happen within the culture itself. It requires a collective shift away from the summit at all costs mentality and a return to an ethos of profound respect for the mountain, for the local communities who call it home, and, most importantly, for human life. In the end, the true measure of a climber isn't whether they stood on top of the world, but how they conducted themselves on the journey. It's about the character they showed when faced with impossible choices, and the legacy they left behind on the ice, be it one of compassion or one of discarded trash. The dark side of mountaineering reminds us that the highest peaks demand more than just physical strength and technical skill. They demand a strength of character that, for some, proves to be the hardest mountain of all to climb.